I curse your name around, however, but all them came right back to me, lingering around, resounding just like an echo. Finding clues to a mystery, making way through a new journey, unfolding the story of Chronicle. Even if the falling angel comes a chasing after me, I will never look back yet at my side. Let this never-ending story begin now. Now is the time to fly away. I heard your name around, however, but all them came right back to me, lingering around, resounding just like an echo. I don't know why I have this feeling, but I feeling come over again. The strange incident came upon me without any preview, or only mystery.
Hello everybody, and welcome to a video in my infrequent PlayStation 4 Hidden Gems series. In this series I take a game that people don't really talk about too much anymore that's on the console. Perhaps they've forgotten it was even there. It might be an older game, or it might be a game that just never got its start and was overlooked at launch. This time around it's a very humble looking but very impressive mystery dungeon game from Spike Chunsoft. It's called One Way Heroics, and it's something that I've actually come back to a fair few times over the years. It's something that I don't sit down and play for long periods of time at any point in time. It's not that kind of game where you can lose dozens and dozens and dozens of hours to it in a sitting. But as a mystery dungeon roguelike, and as one that does some pretty creative things with that base formula, I find that this game really appeals to me, and it's easy to pick up and play whenever I'm in the mood for something fairly light and cheerful. So that's this game. Spike Chunsoft is, of course, very well known for its mystery dungeon games. In fact, it basically invented the entire sub-genre with the Shiren the Wanderer series really kicking the mystery dungeon off. They're roguelikes in that they're based on the very old classic Rogue. But what Shiren and Spike Chunsoft did with the series really modernized it and gave us the formula that a lot of games these days really follow. One Way Heroics is really impressive because it actually breaks away from that Shiren the Wanderer mystery dungeon formula a bit. It's still very recognizable as a mystery dungeon title, but it also does things interesting. It does things differently. It has its own creative center and core, and that's why it is that really impressive game, and something that I think that JRPG fans and mystery dungeon fans really need to check out if they haven't already. So as you can see from the footage, where most mystery dungeon games are enclosed, that's why they're in dungeons, and that's where the mystery dungeon title comes from. This one is actually quite open in that you're on a field of plains with mountains and rivers and villages and things to encounter on the way. It's not open world in the sense that there are limits. You can't go too far north or too far south, for example. But you do have a lot of room to explore, and that exploration element is a little bit compromised by the fact that you're actually on a very tight time clock. As you can see on the left hand side of the screen there's this glowing purple and white thing. That has to do with a curse that has been placed on the world, in which a blight of sorts, which kills everything it touches, is moving from the west to the east at a constant rate, and it's enveloping everything and destroying everything, and you're on a quest to actually stop that and reverse the curse. So you're on a very tight timeline where every step you take, the shine, as it's called, takes a step to the east, and if it catches you, of course, you get killed. So you have to keep moving forwards. But you do have that ability to explore up and down. There are dungeons along the way, there are towns, there are people to talk to, there are shops, all of that stuff that you're used to from the Mystery Dungeon, put in I guess a broader world to explore with that time frame, with that time limit that's forcing you to keep moving forward. So there's these mix of tensions. There's that desire to explore, there's that desire not to miss everything, because a lot of the time you do have to make a choice. Do you want to go north to where there's something of interest, or do you go south where there might be something different to explore? So you've got to keep making these decisions as you play, because you can't possibly get to everywhere before the shine catches it and destroys it. And then there's the other element where every so often the big boss of the game will show up, and that big boss will attack you, and early on it will kill you. You will see in this footage a little bit later on, I decide to fight the boss right at the start of the game, and she absolutely slaughters me. So you need to escape from her as well, so you're constantly fleeing both the shine and the boss character until you can get enough power to try and defeat that boss. Defeating the boss is obviously the goal, because it's the one that doing so will revoke the shine. But in the environment there are all kinds of other things that can really trap you up. Those mountains that you see, they take an awful long time to move through. You can get perks and things that make it a little bit easier, but at the start, at the basic level, it takes something like 6 turns to move every space on the mountains. And the way the layout works, it is randomized because it's a Mystery Dungeon game, but the way the layout works is there will be times where if you take the wrong path, you'll end up absolutely surrounded by mountains and not really able to push on further forwards without the shine catching you. The same goes for water. You can swim through the water, and sometimes you'll need to, but you want to limit how much you need to, how much swimming you need to do. That's why the mini-map on the top right-hand screen is so important. Not only does it show points of interest when you have a bit of lore tell you that there's something in that direction, but it also helps you to plan out your movements through the environment. So you're still exploring, but you're avoiding those kinds of real time delay traps and mountainous ranges and lakes. So yeah, the exploration of this game is really interesting. It's a lot of fun. Every time you play, because it is randomized, every time you play you see a different layout. But even though it is randomized, and a lot of the time random elements in games come at the expense of good game design, this one is fairly limited in terms of the number of different elements that you might come across. So they tend to end up being placed in quite interesting ways, just to add challenge without becoming too complex and too irritating to navigate. Combat plays out much like any other Mystery Dungeon title you might have played. In fact, if you've played a Mystery Dungeon title, this one will be very familiar. Even though it has those kind of fundamental differences and innovations within the genre, it still has that traditional core to it, which people want. I mean, people love the roguelike genre because they grew up playing it. They don't want to see it messed with too much. And I think that's the real brilliance of this title. One Way Heroics does just enough to innovate it so it feels fresh to people who have played a million roguelikes before, without necessarily breaking with the genre to the point that it doesn't feel comfortable for people who still love that classical roguelike. It's a tough balance to meet, and they've done a really good job with that. There is a grind involved in the game, of course, because like all Mystery Dungeon games, the point is that you will die fairly often and you'll need to restart, and every time you restart you really do start from scratch at level 1 and with just the very basics of equipment. There is a limited ability to save some items if you find a really good bit of loot in a run, and I guess that's part of the way that you slowly build up towards being able to beat that final boss. But the point is that you do replay the game fairly often, and in doing so you get certain types of currency which you can use to unlock additional perks and customize your character further and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a grind to this game, just as there is to every other roguelike, but again, roguelike fans are going to enjoy it because they enjoy the grind in the genre. That's kind of the point. That's one of the reasons they play these games. So yeah, this game is really good fun. I really do enjoy it. I really highly rate it to anybody who's enjoyed the roguelikes, and now you're about to see me get absolutely slaughtered by the boss. And you do have to be a fan of all this stuff, because as you can see, that boss is not exactly the most visually intimidating enemy that's ever been. That said, though the game is quite simple in terms of its graphics, it's quite pretty. It's very does a good job with the pixel art and the character design and all that kind of stuff. So it has that nice visual appeal, and the music is quite gorgeous. So overall, it's a well-made production, despite being a very obvious budget and being a very obviously indie niche title. Anyway, that's my views on Mystery Chronicle, excuse me, One Way Heroics. Once again, I do highly recommend it to anybody who likes their roguelikes, if you have been playing quite a few of them. This is probably not the introduction to the genre, because a lot of its appeal does rely on you knowing, I guess, the roguelike structure and how this game kind of works within that and also innovates on it. So it's more for existing fans than to introduce new people to the genre. But I think at this stage most people have played a roguelike, especially if you're into Japanese RPGs. Surely you know what a Chocobo Dungeon or a Shiren the Wanderer is. So yeah, this game is for you. Thank you very much as always for watching my videos. I hope this was of interest in helping you perhaps to find a new game to play if you haven't heard of it before. Do let me know if you enjoy it. Do let me know if you've played this before and it's a favourite or it's something you still play to this day. Always keen to hear from fans. Otherwise, please do back me on Patreon. I always ask this, but it sounds like I'm begging, I know, but it really, really, really does help me to continue to do these things. And otherwise, we'll see you at the next video. Thank you for your time.